Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. If this is our first time meeting, I'm Ashley Koff. I'm a registered dietitian and CEO of the Better Nutrition program. And probably relevant to today's conversation, I've had my own business for a little over 20 years, doing different things in the nutrition and health space. And so legal has been, everything from contracts to, employee contracts to what I say I will do. And I've gotten pretty savvy at one side of it. But now having my own online company, boy, I realized there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know. So I started doing some digging and I met our guest online. And I am so excited. I just said to her, we have to connect to share her as a resource for all of you. So the primary objective today is literally just to introduce you guys to Sam, because I very rarely say this, but you're probably like one of the only alerts that I actually pay attention to on Facebook, where I'm like, what's the topic she's going live on? And how can I find it? And I think it's one of those things that whether you're a healthcare practitioner, whether you are somebody who has a license or doesn't have a license, there's a lot of stuff in the fine print today that we just are not maybe paying attention to. Then on the total flip side, for many of us that are maybe like type A+, A++, et cetera. There's stuff that we're paying so much attention to, but maybe not really getting people who actually understand our business to be able to give us that guidance. So Sam, you've really hit the sweet spot on that part. And just a reminder to anyone, I should have started with this at the introduction. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them. That is the goal of today, to get them answered. But also, hello, Sushil. But also, if you are watching us not live at a time that is better for you, I will help you get your answers. We'll just send them over to Sam as well. So anyway, Sam, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everybody for joining us live or on the replay. And like Ashley said, I'm happy if even if you're here live, if you think of something later, I know I always think of questions later on, feel free to pop them in and I'll circle back to get you your answer.
Awesome. So Sam, let's start off with who you are. I think that's actually a really important. I always say to people when they're getting nutrition information, make sure you know who that person is before you make a decision about taking their advice. So if you can run us through your CV for real quickly, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So I always say I was born November 12th, 1987, right. And we can start there, but that would be a long story. But I was a corporate attorney in the Philadelphia area. I actually did like healthcare corporate law in the Philadelphia area for about 5 years, and I was beyond miserable as an attorney. It really was not my thing. I knew from day one, unfortunately, but I spent about those, pretty much all of those 5 years up until the end when I planned, a transition, kind of acting as like a victim of my circumstances. Like I had this terrible career path had fallen upon me like some sort of illness, and I acted like, well, it was me, and it was very in a negative space. I guess a little bit to my credit, the law is kind of a negative space. So there's a lot of it around you. And so, it's a little hard to rise above it at times. But I really stayed in that place until I had this like crazy, what felt to me as a near-death experience, although it was probably not in reality. But it's like I was on a plane, the plane like dropped out of the sky, and I just had this moment where I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like there's something so much better than this, and I'm acting like I don't have a choice, and I so have a choice. So I just wanted to share that with anybody who's like maybe in that career transition part still, or want to go out on your own and start a business. And I actually didn't leave to start this business at first. I actually left to start a wellness business. So I wanted to do like wellness consulting on the corporate side and go into companies like the ones that I was working at, were big companies dealing with all these employee issues, and people at work were really unhealthy. So I wanted to help them be healthier at work. So I started doing that, and I got introduced to this amazing online space. And although on the one hand, I was so excited to see like, oh my goodness, there are so many businesses going on that I had no idea. That's amazing. You can work from your computer. You can be anywhere. You can do all of these amazing things and help people. I was equally as horrified with what I saw going on online. And I was like, oh my goodness, you cannot say that. You cannot work with people like that. Where is their contract? Like they're totally out of scope. This person's really risking themselves and their business, and they don't even know it. That was the thing. Like most people are not trying to be brazen, I think, and like against the law. I just think people didn't know. And so I started digging around, and I want to share this part with you in case you're in that like research part of your business. Started asking just a lot of questions, leading with curiosity, asking people like, well, first I started asking, what do you need? And the truth is most people don't know what they need. And the same goes with your industry as well, right? So that was the wrong question to be asking. And really it was like, well, what problems are you having? Or like, what are you concerned about? What's bothering you? What's keeping you up at night? That's a lot of the times the question that I ask. And I realized that a lot of the reason why you guys didn't have certain legal things in place were one of two things. Either one, you couldn't find what you were looking for because most of what you were looking for didn't really apply to our kinds of business. Or two, there were these kind of like old myths that were still hanging over, like legal is expensive, or legal is intimidating, or it's going to be scary and boring, and people are going to tell me I can't do all these things that I want to do. So I knew there had to be a better way. So I created a business, my current business a little over 2 years ago, where I help women in the health and wellness space legally protect your business through what I call like fill in the blank legal templates, my DIY legal templates, and now through my Ultimate Bundle program. So that's my signature program that gives you 10 of my legal templates, like all those contracts and website policies that you need. Plus it gives you all the legal trainings that you need, the video trainings to learn how to legally operate your business, start it, register it, and even just work with people online and protect your content. So that's a bit about what I do and kind of my background.
I love it. And I actually didn't know that part about your background, that you started off in the wellness space, because one of the things that I think is so important is people to actually understand our businesses as wellness providers, as healthcare providers. And that's something that has been a challenge to find, really in the space, especially, on the legal side. So, a lot of what you're describing, it's interesting, is when I created the Better Nutrition program, it's really about, needing to ask questions. It's about, can your practitioner and the patient have the information that they need? How are they doing those assessments? So I think I actually want to start off in that place, because there is, as you talk about the 10 the 10 tools or the 10 assessments that you have, 10 sounds like a lot, like on one hand, right? Where it's like, okay, how do I figure all this out? But so when we're starting a business, we all think like, okay, LLC, like I know I need to, protect this part of it. But give us a little bit of a sense of the scope of what your this bundle of products is covering, so we can understand, kind of spark some inspiration about what we actually need to be focused on from an online business.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually broke the Ultimate Bundle program into 5 sections so that it kind of walks people through step by step. No matter, my clients are split 50-50. I have beginners and I have very experienced, like people who are doing very well in their business, but just never got these things in place. So it's, if this goes out to both of you, so, and everybody in between. Yeah. So the way that I broke up the bundle and the way that I kind of teach legal in general is step 1 is what I call BYOB. So it's build your own business. And so it's all about registering your business, which, as you said, Ashley, it's like a lot of people think of LLCs sometimes as, and you might have heard me teach on this before, like people treat LLCs a little bit like a checkbox, like, oh, I went and got my LLC, cool, I'm all done with that. But it's actually just like as if you guys handed out information about eating and nutrition and then just like called it a day. There are other things we have to do to kind of follow up, and things adjust and change. So even in that first module, even though you've registered a business maybe already, or if you've not, it walks you through how to do that. We also talk about setting up payment gateways and like taking payment and managing your money in a way that's consistent with running a legally legit LLC. Because I think the biggest thing that women just aren't aware of when it comes to LLCs is that it is not just a checkbox that we can just register and like think that protects us. We actually have to act like LLCs. So I'm teaching you step by step how to do that through managing your money, through the way you identify yourself on your site and in your branding and in your contracts and all of that.
Yeah.
And then I move into teaching you how to protect yourself through your website, because for so many of us, that's the first kind of point of contact, or like the main point, right? Because even when we're posting on social or we're on a podcast or something, it's all pointing back to our site. And I think one of the biggest, most common misunderstandings in American like law has to do with people think that you can only get sued by clients. And so there can be issues with us posting content on our site, or something we say in a podcast episode or something like that. So we want to start with your website first and protect you with the 3 major website policies. So that's crucial for anyone, but especially for what you guys do, because you're talking about things that are so individualistic that you want to make sure. And there are all kinds of like scope issues, and we could talk about allergies. Like there's so many issues here, right? So the website policies are essential. So that's kind of the second section. From there, I moved to talking with you about contracts, because now you've got this business register that protects you personally. Your website is all solid so that no matter who's looking at it, you've covered your legal bases. And then now we're most concerned about anybody who's actually paying you money, because yes, I know I said that anyone can sue you, but the truth is that if anyone's going to sue you, it's usually a client, someone that you've worked with, someone you've exchanged money with. And it's not often, it's not frequent and all that good stuff, but we just have to be prepared. So having contracts in place that are solid and protect you is a very smart thing to do, obviously. And then the fourth section has to do with teaching you how to work with clients online in the three major ways. So one-on-one, through a group, and through a course or some kind of like evergreen membership program, something like that. And then the final section, the fifth section, teaches you all about intellectual property. So I teach you how to protect your content and your stuff with copyrights and trademarks. So I kind of cover all the bases that you would need in an online business.
Yeah. And I know I came to you and I was like, okay, I think like I'm probably not where I need to be in all of those pieces. But as a starting out business, I was like, okay, I think I'm good in a lot of those. But for me, it was actually, I think it was a green juice with my boyfriend and a friend in LA who runs a very large online business, and he works for Nationwide. So he's here in Columbus working for a insurance company. He's like, so what do you guys have for your like general liability? We're like, what are you talking about? And I was just like, I mean, literally it was like, put down the juices. Like, what are you talking about? I've always had professional liability. I know as a dietitian, you know, that's like step number one. You know, once you do your exam, you're so excited to put out your shingle that we do that. But I didn't know anything about insurance. And when I reached out to you and then participated in one of your online programs, one of the things that you said to me, like, has just stuck in my head, it's why I'm so passionate about getting this insurance sorted, was that if I operate my business out of my home and something happens in my home and I don't have the right insurance, that I can actually lose out on my home stuff. Get it? You know, if they figure out I'm doing business there. So I'm not articulating it properly, but walk me through for a moment how we often don't think about legal and insurance kind of coming together, but you've explained they're integrally linked. So take me through that part.
Yeah, sure. So I call this, what I call it, this kind of the way that this all flows together is like the legally legit trifecta. So if you can imagine in your mind a triangle, the first point of the triangle is the LLC, because that's what legally separates you, Ashley, from your business, your LLC, so that if someone was to sue you or even threaten to sue you, you personally are not at risk. Your personal assets are not at risk, only those of the business, right? So that's the first point of the triangle. The second is really having all these website policies and these contracts in place so that you actually have proof to back yourself up, because otherwise it's just like your word. And a lot of times verbal contracts for what we do are not even enforceable anyway, because the amount is too much and all that. But the business insurance is the third, and I think one of the most crucial parts of the triangle, because really at the end of the day, I always say it's like the rich uncle that picks up the tab at dinner. The business insurance is what will pay the bill if something happens, because you can separate yourself all day long from the business personally. You can have the contract as proof. But the truth is that like 95.8%, something like that, of cases in America settle. And even when they have no merit, right, we just pay people to go away. And if that settlement was $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000, that would shut down a lot of people's businesses. So the point of having business insurance is twofold. One, they actually provide you with an attorney, a business attorney, and they pay that attorney's fee. That's the most important part. And then two is that they pay any judgment or settlement on your business's behalf, as long as you're sued for something that's covered by your policy. It's just like any other insurance. So the part that Ashley's talking about is that there are actually there are like 9, I think, kinds of business insurance, but for what we do, there are really only 2 major types. So for what we do in online service-based businesses, there's commercial general liability policies, and then there's professional liability policies. You mostly need both, right? So, and most of the time, the commercial general part is cheap. Much cheaper than the professional liability. So it's just like one of those things you would add on and there's no sweat. So when we're talking about this, we're not talking about one or the other, just so everybody knows. It would be more like you'd need both. It's very rare that I see somebody who only needs one or the other. So they, if you don't provide any services, if you had like a brick and mortar business, then professional liability is not applicable. But I think for like what we all do, then you need both. So the professional liability is the one that Ashley mentioned, is more of what I call oopsies insurance. So that's where it covers anything that a client experiences as a problem. It's kind of like the result that they are claiming. And remember, it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be your fault, all of that kind of, we can argue the merits of it. But the point is, if someone said, Ashley told me to eat more avocados and it turns out I'm allergic and I got sick, that's the kind of insurance that would pick up that claim. If I sued her saying, you told me bad information, essentially, or I experienced a bad result as a result of your information, that kind of stuff. So that's what professional liability does. Commercial general liability covers more like bodily injury and premises. And so you might be thinking like, well, what's the difference? Like, I don't see clients in my home or that kind of stuff. But commercial general liability can kick in for a couple of different things that you might not expect. So one would be if you go out and host workshops a lot, or you host retreats. Like, a lot of my clients are starting to do more in-person events. And so when they're going to offer an event somewhere, the event person is asking, like, can I have a copy of your certificate of liability insurance? And they're like, what? And they don't understand what that means. It's not your professional liability. It is it's the commercial general liability. That's what they're asking for, because that covers more of premises liability. It covers more if someone comes to your event and slips and falls, or if they eat something at your event and have a reaction or something like that. So it covers that whole thing. And obviously, if you do see clients in your home or you go to clients' homes, that's the kind of insurance that we're talking about. It also, though, would cover, and this is what Ashley was referring to, one of my concerns, and this is just like a tricky area of insurance law, and this is what I used to do, so I'm just always trying to like outsmart the insurance companies and kind of cover this part up for you guys, is that if you have a home office and you claim, and it's like a specific area, so like this room I'm in now here, and I claim all 112 square feet of it on as a home office space as a tax deduction. So one of my concerns for you guys would be that if you claim a certain area of your home as being solely and strictly for your business, let's say there's some like weird event that happens like in just my office alone, like the rain started coming through the windows or something like that, right? I would be concerned that my homeowner's policy would decline it, saying that this is my office if they found out about it. So that's possible that they could do that. It's possible that something can happen where like my computers are in here, like I have a couple of pieces of expensive equipment that I would just want covered for being in this space. It's also possible your homeowners would cover it anyway. The point is there's not much, it's not going to be a huge expense, I think, for just having a little bit of overlap, and sometimes that overlap can just be very comforting. So yes, that's what Ashley was referring to as to like the space itself, but it would also cover that bodily injury component and like in-person component if you're doing those things as well.
Yeah, and I actually found, or I'm finding that my general liability, we're folding in a cyber liability just for data breach, just on that part. So I think it's, that what is nice is more of these policies are coming about. Finding the right policy. Sam actually introduced me to someone that she's worked with. And I think, finding somebody that understands your business is so critical. So I want to talk about another area because when I started this online company, I've done just a little bit of like, I've asked, so it's been rip and repeat or borrowing, not stealing, but informed borrowing. But, I feel like every time I get a communication from someone, either in their email, and I literally responded to another dietitian. I was like, oh my gosh, your email communication at the end around your HIPAA and the privacy and that sort of thing in your email is genius. Can I just borrow it? Right. And then like I was looking at another site and it was the disclaimer I thought was so great. And, can I borrow it on that part? So I guess the question is, when we look at disclaimers in the larger space of who this information is intended for, how am I covering what my communication is, do your tools handle helping people develop those themselves, or do you think that it's okay to find somebody who's like-minded with you and borrow, edit, or customize from there? What would you recommend? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I get asked this a lot. So I think this is something really important to go over. So first and foremost, like, what Ashley's done is a little bit different, but what I actually see more often is people, as I call it, borrowing in air quotes, is not really, they're not asking, right? So we have to remember first and foremost that just doing that, like copying and pasting copy and pasting is illegal, right? So we can't do that. We can't steal from other people's policies. People have paid for those. They've been drafted by attorneys. Attorneys technically retain rights in them. Like, there's a whole host of issues. The person who paid for it retains rights in it. So that's like a whole issue in and of itself. But I actually think the bigger issue is that people are doing themselves such a disservice when they make their contracts that way, right? So, and you guys could appreciate this because this would be like me saying like, well, why can't I just go out and do my nutrition research and I'll just like create something for myself? So if you don't have the expertise, right, of like knowing what's supposed to even be there and like what makes up the healthy diet to begin with, and how do you know that what you've come up with yourself is right? So the issue I always see is that there are a couple. So one is that people don't know where other people's fill in the blanks were. That's what I always say. So they don't know in this like legal mumbo jumbo, they'll have this whole paragraph, but they don't know what was actually customized for that person versus what was just like the legal language that needs to be in there. And what's actually most important at the end of the day with legal is that it's true as to you and like the way that you want to run your business, not necessarily always the way that you have to run your business. So when you copy things or borrow things, even like with consent from other people, you're adopting their way of running their business, which you don't have to. So that's one. Two, though, is that unless somebody understands like exactly what all of these things say, then a lot of times what I actually see, and something I've pointed out to people in the past when it's like really egregious, they actually make statements in those policies that are not true. And that because they're not actually how they run their business. So I'll see something and be like, well, that's actually not true, that you don't do that. Like you say here that there's this like security thing you have in place, but I noticed on your site you don't have that. And they're like, oh, I had no idea because I just copy and pasted it from some person. I thought it was standard. It's like, no, it's customized to you and the way you run your business. So with all that being said, I think one of the cool things about, obviously, first and foremost, like it's always best that I'm very honest about this, that it's always best for somebody to be able to go out and hire their own attorney and get something customized for them from scratch. If you can do that, that's amazing, right? And the reason though I created this business, because it is like prohibitively expensive. It's thousands and thousands of dollars for like one contract. So the thing that I think is a nice kind of in between as to what I've created is that you get the opportunity to set your own policies, to be the CEO in your business, and to know that something's more tailored to you. But also the way that I've set it up is that you get a how-to video tutorial that I've filmed for each and every template itself. So I have something like 15, 20 templates. Each and every one I've filmed a video tutorial where it's actually like a screen capture video of that template. And I'm walking you through it step by step, line by line, teaching you what it means, teaching you how to further customize it to you and your business, and also explaining to you how to understand it and further customize it. Because one of the other issues I'm always concerned about with copying is that legal is not a one and done. So legal has to continue to evolve with your business. So how are you going to know when to go back to those documents and where to even make a change? Instead, you could pull up this video again and watch it if you say, oh, my business has really changed. Some of my clients have totally changed like their business model. And so they've gone just back in, they're able to redo them and customize it to themselves again. And they're able to explain it to their clients. That's something I also heard a lot, was that people would hold back on growing their business because they were freaked out about like, is this contract even legit that I'm sending out to clients? And if I send it to them, are they going to know? Like, I'm going to look like a fraud. Maybe someone will see it, or they'll know that it won't hold up, so they won't pay me. So you'll have a lot more comfort in knowing, like, this is something I've put together. And then if you want to take it to a local attorney and have them look it over, you could. That would still be a much more affordable option. Or some people understand kind of the risk of like, this isn't the most solid thing in the world, but I am protecting myself much better than copying and pasting from other people.
Yeah, I think, and that's such a good point to bring up, because on the flip side, I've had people who have asked me for my contracts before, like, oh, I know you do this, like, can I borrow this? And I'm like, you totally can, but like, I know exactly, because I went through with my lawyer what I wanted to do in that part, and unless you're doing it, the exact same way as me, so I think that's a really important part. So I had someone reach out, she's not able to join us today, but saw that I was posting this, and she was like, okay, it's one of those, I think we all have these moments where it's like, we know in our guts what you're going to tell us, but tell it to us so that we can actually respond and do what we're supposed to do. She said, the contracts of people that pay you, totally get that. Like, need to have, I'm always looking out for myself and, what could happen and how can we exit something hopefully with grace as opposed to, a lot of money and injury and all of that stuff. She said, but I'm really struggling with, she's a startup company. She hires college students. She's got a VA. She's got, just people that come to her events that help her out. And she's just wondering, to what extent does she need like contracts with all of them? And as background, which I thought was relevant on this part, she is a health coach, so not a medical license, but she is at these events and the people who are doing like VA work for her, they're seeing other, like her clients' names. So there's, there could be a component on that part. So that's, I think that's sort of all the background I got, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And this goes for any of you that are hiring people or even just bringing in people to help on certain projects. So whether it's a VA, college students, or like one-off contractors for something, basically, whenever you're hiring someone, you're basically, you come to a crossroads of deciding whether you're hiring them as an employee or hiring them as an independent contractor. And 99.999% of us in all of the situations in online business are hiring independent contractors. An employee comes with a host of rights and responsibilities, both on your part and the employee's part, that most of us just don't want to get into. And I don't really recommend it most of the time unless your business gets, much larger. So the reason I bring that up is because it's actually very legally important because of those rights and responsibilities that you owe to that, if that person was classified as an employee. Really important to have legal proof by way of contract that this person was hired or is working for you or volunteering in an event as an independent contractor. So the reason we lay that out is because we basically make them sign a million ways to Sunday that they understand that they're an independent contractor and not an employee. Therefore, you're not paying their taxes for them. You're not reporting certain things. You don't owe them workers' comp. You don't owe them time off or paid vacation. You don't owe them maternity leave or FMLA to take care of a sick loved one. Like, there are so many things that you would owe to them if they were an employee that you don't owe in this scenario. So I would encourage her to get an independent contractor contract that very clearly, and I have a template for this, but that very clearly lays out like all of the details of your arrangement, says that they're not an independent contractor. What I actually find most important are more like the VA situation that you mentioned, because not only are they seeing clients' names and things like that, which in the health space is an issue in terms of health privacy and PHI, but we're also talking about business information. So that your VA is probably a VA for other businesses. And so one of the things I know I'd be concerned about is like, I don't want my VA going to someone else and saying, well, guess what? Sam does it this way, or Sam has this thing set up. That might be my secret sauce, right? And so those are what we call trade secrets. And so you have trade secrets inherent in your business. It's your processes, your methods, your way of doing business. Your customer list is considered a trade secret, even beyond the health issue of the privacy. So when we're talking about that, we're actually really concerned about even just protecting that part of your business, not allowing them to use maybe like the programs that you pay for every month for their own use or for their other clients, right? I don't want them creating like social media banners on my paid subscription for someone else who doesn't pay for it, like stuff like that. So really going through that, really laying out all that liability stuff we were talking about that I'm not paying their taxes out of their paycheck. I'm paying them a flat fee, and then they are expected to file their taxes and pay their taxes, and that can't be on me. All of that kind of stuff has to be very clearly laid out. So I would encourage her to definitely use that kind of agreement with anyone, even if they're volunteering, because you also want them to know that they're not a representative of your company or your brand in like a larger sense. So they can't go off making announcements about like, oh, Ashley, well, just tell Ashley you're friends with me. She'll give you $100 off or something. They don't have the authority to do that. So you want to make sure that's all clearly spelled out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So another one, most of us, I hope, that are doing this like for businesses are super passionate about our information and what we want to share, and we want to help people. And again, a little bit different if you have a medical license to lose or if you don't, right, on that part. So we're talking to both audiences. But when we're out, when we're in an environment like this, so for me, I do nutrition interviews with different experts all the time, and I'm asking them questions, and I'm also, if people pop in live, and helping them get those questions answered, or I might be so excited about something that I saw that I go live on Instagram and I'm talking about it. Where do we cover ourselves from that content? You mentioned your professional liability. Is that enough, or, in our Instagram profile, or, when we start something, or at the bottom line of like, not this interview, but the one I'm doing later tonight, do I need to have, a disclaimer on here? How far do we have to go in this information sharing space to not be held, accountable by somebody who perceives what we're sharing as information as personalized recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always recommend both like an informal and a formal approach. So on the informal side, I always suggest using basically your own words, or some of my clients will take like the disclaimer that they get from me and then kind of come up with a playful way to integrate it. So I always recommend, like right now we could tell people this, yes, I'm a attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I'm not even the attorney for my clients. I'm not acting as an attorney. I don't give out legal advice. All of our states' laws are so different and our license laws are different. You should go to your own attorney if you need to find out like what's exactly okay. Don't take anything I say today as being like, Sam said it was okay, because that's definitely not what I'm saying. So that would be kind of an example of like what I call an informal disclaimer. So I would always recommend that when you're going to give what I call content heavy talks or lives or trainings of some sort, I always recommend starting off with that. Or some of my clients who have like YouTube videos will put it on the bottom of the YouTube or make a screen, of it, something like that. The more formal version would be wherever you're pointing people to, you want to make sure you have those 3 major website policies. The privacy policy, because that's the one that dictates how you're treating people's personal information while they're there visiting your stuff. A website disclaimer, which is the one who tells people who you are, what you do, and more importantly, what you don't do. And then your terms and conditions, which go through all the policies of like how they can get out of you having their information, and the third party links and your affiliate disclosures and your payment procedures, and all of that are listed in your terms and conditions. So when you're pointing somebody back from your Instagram link to your site, or something like that, that's why it's important to have it. Or some of my clients, I'll encourage them to link to it in the description of their Facebook community, or maybe put it underneath the video, like to read my full disclaimer, my website disclaimer, visit, and then put the URL there. So you can kind of start to integrate it. Once you have those 3 major website policies on your site, you then have the URL, so you can start to use that other places. Facebook, for example, requires a link to your privacy policy to run Facebook ads, and they actually go and check to see if it's okay. And some people's ads get canceled if their privacy policy is not legitimate or not enough. You can always tell when I look at it, it's small. So those are just kind of some of the ways. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. We just went through it because I have an Alexa skill, and Alexa, Amazon is now also requiring a disclaimer. And it was really interesting to me because, of course they looked at me because it's My Better Nutrition. We developed it with them. So they were like, oh, we know you're giving recommendations. But we started, my person who was helping me on the marketing side started digging through, and like nobody else has these disclaimers. So sometimes it feels punitive, but I think it's so smart to have it in the beginning to just clarify. I like what you said, clarify what you're not doing, I think is really, really important on that part. Okay.
I think a lot of people assume that if they just explain what they're doing, that's okay. But it's like, you have to remember that the people we're talking to are not in our industry. I mean, mine are, but you guys are not. So it's different, so they don't know when you're talking about all of this, that like, what does that mean? What's the difference between an RD and what's the difference between a nutritionist and a health coach? They don't get it. So you want to explain some of that. And by the way, if anybody follows me on Instagram, it's very funny. You just said that today. My post today is about the legality of like all this stuff that I always hear of like, but other people aren't doing it. Or I saw so-and-so who's really big and like, she doesn't have that. So isn't like, I'm not going to get in trouble. So you guys can go on to read about the answer to that one.
Oh, that's perfect. And I do like, I find like the hairs on my neck go up at times, and it just is frustrating. Like I'm always the hashtag sponsored or the hashtag ad, or, oversharing like who I'm handshaking with, like, and somebody's like, you didn't even get anything. I'm like, I know, but like, I know that I'm promoting them, and I want that to be clear. And, but then you have these moments where you're like, look at so-and-so with 1 million followers who isn't doing that part. But what I stand to lose is like, I'm very keenly aware of what I stand to lose. So I think that has value. So
I also think it greatly contributes to the trust between you and your audience. I know for sure. I was actually just thinking of this because I'm working on a post and a free training about how to run legal like giveaways and contests. And so I was actually thinking about this because one of the things I'm going to recommend in this article is about how when you have people enter a contest and then you take their email address and put them onto your email list. Yeah. I was thinking back and remembering how that violates CAN-SPAM Act in some ways. But so I was thinking about how I've entered contests before and then all of a sudden started receiving emails from all kinds of people who were involved in the contest. And I immediately was turned off by their brands. Yeah. So if it's any solace to help you guys feel better about like but if I do this, isn't this going to be so bad? I actually think it can really establish a lot of trust with people, and they appreciate you being honest and upfront. Everyone's been added to like an email list they didn't think they signed up for. Everyone's been spammed by somebody on Instagram. Like there are all kinds of things. So I think people really appreciate that. And I know people have reached out and said that to me.
I've had the exact same experience. I really agree with you. And one of the things that it may, as you're putting this training together, be relevant that I've had with giveaways is, so I've offered, like we have our nutrition plan, and I offer those all the time as giveaways for, in combination with companies that are wanting to do something. And then I notice they do that. And I'm like, oh, no. Like this giveaway is literally just, so actually investigating the policy of somebody that you might participate in their giveaway, or said differently, like having standards for a giveaway you'll participate in, I think is really important. And that one, especially as we've gotten involved in these summits, I've really been unwilling to do them. And I just had a conversation with a healthcare practitioner, and she was like, wow, this is the most thorough 15 minutes of questioning that I've had. And I was like, yeah, because I'm not going to do it if you turn around and people come here for information and you start, selling them stuff right out the door. So I think that's really smart. So I had a series of questions that kind of overlapped coming in, where it was about, so that sticky area of like, when do you sue and how do you go down that path? So and this is a range of different questions. People have said things to me like, well, somebody borrowed, or like didn't borrow, they took my information and reposted it. Or, I see that somebody is using something and I have my LLC on there, and they used it at a conference and they didn't ask me about it, right? And you mentioned the trade secrets. So I have a VA and I'm pretty sure that they shared that content because I see somebody else who's doing the same thing, or, whatever on that part. So how do you advise on, and this may be that you have a tool for it, but on assessing what the next step is when you feel that your stuff has been borrowed without asking? Let's use it that way.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And this is such a difficult topic because I always say I'm like the worst lawyer ever. I'm the least litigious lawyer of all time. I hated this part. I think because people who maybe aren't familiar with litigation don't understand quite how dark and terrible and awful and expensive and time consuming it is. It literally eats you alive. It takes years and years. I think people think it's like much quicker and easier and you just like walk in and get it over with. It takes years and years. It's insanely expensive. And all that business insurance that we were talking about earlier, they don't pay for you to sue other people, and they only defend you. And by the way, they don't defend you if you steal people's content. That is something that's never covered by professional liability. Okay. So if you get accused of having copied someone's content or infringing on their trademark, they don't cover that. So you'll be on your own. So you want to make sure, that's why I always start out with step one, make sure you're doing make sure your stuff's all in order first. It's always like a good check yourself before you wreck yourself moment, and be like, let me make sure I'm not using anyone's content either, or even that person's content, obviously. So that's step one. And then I'd say beyond that, I always believe in starting out simplest, simple is best in this case. And so first things first, you obviously ask them to take it down. I recommend using a more formal way of communication, like don't DM them, don't send them a Facebook message. I would send like an email. That's kind of like the quasi-formal way in today's day and age. And because then the next step beyond that would be like more of an official letter, something maybe scary from a lawyer. And it doesn't always have to hop right to suing, right? So there are a couple of like ways to escalate this. I'd say first thing is kind of the person-to-person email, like of this is my thing. I see you're using it. You didn't have permission or whatever. There are kind of varying degrees of like what's bad in these cases where people just use without permission versus like copying. Is it different? A little bit, worse. So I would try that first, I think. And this is just my opinion. This isn't like, of course, you could go straight to the suing thing. This is just my opinion as to how I would escalate this personally. There's then kind of an in-between, more formal step called a DMCA takedown notice. So through the federal government, and if you're in the U.S., you can go on and like file a complaint saying that somebody has taken, it's like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So you want to say that someone has taken something digital of yours and they've copied it. That would be more for the people, not somebody who's really using it without your permission. Although that's not true because people do that with photos a lot. They'll like, even though they had one way that it was permissible to use, they're using it in a different way. So I would say you could still do a DMCA takedown notice. And if you Google that, they'll come up with like the form. So you can file that, and then it kind of becomes more of like a government issue. So then the government can kind of reach around and take it down. So that happens a lot on like Pinterest. A lot of my health and wellness clients have things that are taken from that. This one client who years and years, she does intuitive eating now, but years and years and years ago, she used to do weight loss nutrition programs. And there's a great like before and after photo. She doesn't even believe in before and afters now. So she has this before and after photo that's constantly stolen and used on Pinterest as like, look at my weight loss, but yet it's her. And so she's always having to file DMCA takedown. And basically what they do is they work with Pinterest to go behind and just say, boop, taken down.
Got it.
You're not really going through the person anymore. You're going through the medium in which it's being repurposed.
Yeah.
So that would be one. And beyond that, then it would probably escalate to a cease and desist notice. So a lot of people think you have to do this through a lawyer. No, you don't have to. It's just that obviously it's a lot scarier when it comes from a lawyer. So if you really want to get it done, it's probably a good way. It's going to cost a pretty penny though. So that's always where it just kind of comes up to like a business judgment decision, I think. And yes, beyond that would then be suing them, or hiring an attorney to go one step beyond a cease and desist, which is where they then would threaten litigation. Maybe even what I used to do is send a cease and desist with a copy of a draft complaint saying this is going to be filed on Monday if it's not, removed by then. That usually goes really well. So you can do something like that with a lawyer. That's very, very expensive. So all of these things kind of increase, but those are essentially the steps. One thing you do want to know, though, and remember, if any of you have taken formal steps to have something registered. So if you've registered something with the U.S. Copyright Office, like a booklet or like your plan or something like this, right, that's been registered now, or a trademark. So if you've trademarked your logo or a name of a program or your business, if you have a creative business title, if you've registered those, it's actually part of your enforceability of that trademark or that copyright is whether or not you go around enforcing it. So if you stop enforcing it, it's actually considered to be abandoned and you will lose the right to enforce it down the line. So you can't cherry pick, which is why you hear these like sad stories all the time about like a big mean corporation putting out like a mom and pop shop and everybody's always like, that's so mean. Why do you do that? Well, it's because they would actually lose the right to enforce it on a bigger scale if they don't enforce it across the board. You have to enforce it. So if you see someone using it, you have to go after it. So I tell you that because that is one of the factors that I coach clients on to deciding whether or not you want to register a trademark. People come to me all the time asking, do I need to register this or that? And I always say, if you found out someone else was using it, are you willing to hire an attorney, go after them, sue them, send a cease and desist? And people will be like, no, I would never do that. I'm like, well, then you might want to consider otherwise.
Oh, it's so powerful. So a good barometer for me is my head is spinning with a to-do list that's like 18 items long. And so I'm going to cut us here, even though I have about 15 or 20 more questions that I would certainly ask. But I want to end with one question, and then I'd love for you to just share for everyone what their next steps can be if they want to get more of the information that you were talking about. So question, as you know, our businesses are, for a lot of us in this online space, like when I think about June of 2018 compared to June of 2019, my business is in a totally different place. So, you know, when I talk to people, I'm like, hey, quarterly, I'd love you to do a digestive evaluation and tune up. I think that's like good timing for us to see how your digestive system is prepped for the next season. What's the right season or time frame for a legal review for your business?
Yeah, sure. So if you've never done anything, then I'd say right now, because there's no point in even moving forward, right? So anytime you're even putting out content, advertising your services, ready to work with a client, people will say to me all the time, like, I just haven't gotten as many clients as I'd like to. And I'd say, if you are in the place where you're ready, if you got that email saying, hey, Ashley, I'm ready to work with you, you would be willing to move forward, then that's when you know. So for those of you who haven't taken care of it yet, I'd say now. And then moving forward, I mean, this is kind of the nice thing about getting it done. This is not something you're going to have to revisit often. What I would say is that if there's a major change in your business or the way that you collect information or what you do or how you work with people, sure, I would go back and change your website policies. And so I think that happens at most. I mean, I think even once a year would be a lot for people. Some people go longer than that without having to change them. Your contracts, I think, evolve a bit more in the sense that my clients seem to get smarter and smarter with like setting their boundaries and knowing like, oh, I didn't realize I had to be a little bit more explicit about this. And so you can go in as needed, I would say. As things come up, I would continue to add it if something happens with a client or you realize that you weren't clear about something, I would just go back in and add that and make sure. If you've been using contracts, the same old contracts for like a long time and have never really revisited them, then yes, I would say definitely schedule a little quarterly like review of your contracts, but otherwise I would do it as needed.
Awesome. So other than heading to your website, I mentioned at the beginning that I pay attention to the alerts. I think I get them because I'm a part of your Facebook group. Is that right? Okay. So share with us your Facebook group. Obviously, people can go to your website, but where can they get all the goods?
Yeah, sure. So what Ashley's talking about is I offer a free Facebook community called Fearless Fempire, and that's for women with service-based businesses to learn how to legally protect your business. And I do that through offering free video trainings inside the group, posting free content, obviously, showing you all the blog posts that I'm posting about just to help you with legal issues. But it's also a place where you can ask questions and start conversations, obviously, around this as well. And then beyond that, yes, I would love for you all to visit me through my website, which is just samvanderwielen.com. And there you can find all of the legal templates that I offer a la carte. So basically there are two options to work with me. All of the templates that we've talked about today are available individually, or you can pick and choose what you need. Or you can go and take a look at that Ultimate Bundle program that I mentioned. So you can just click the Ultimate Bundle tab at the top of the page, learn more about the 10 legal templates that are included. It really gives you all the contracts and website policies that you need to run the kinds of businesses that you guys run, plus those 23 video trainings that are not available anywhere else. They're not the trainings that are in my free community. Teaching you really more in depth and with actionable takeaways, all of the things we've talked about today, how to legally protect yourself. So you also get support from me. Obviously, you get email access to me. You get an invite to a private client-only Facebook community as well, separate from my free group, where you can access me and ask questions. I make myself readily available, so you get that. And obviously, you get like lifetime updates. I keep adding to it. I keep even adding there are more than 10 templates in there. I just don't tell anybody. There are more than 10 templates in there, and there are lots more trainings and all that good stuff and more to come. So they get everything. Once you're in, you're in. So it's a wonderful group. In terms of social, I would love to connect with you guys on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram, and I'm just at Sam Vander Wielen on Instagram.
Great. And the whole time you've been doing this incredible interview, your name and website have been below. So for anyone who's wondering about spelling or any of that stuff, it's all right there and super easy. We also follow and post about her at the Better Nutrition program. So thank you. If you are watching, remember at a time that is better for you. Most of you had a busy day today and said to me, hey, are you going to share this? Of course, if you're a part of our list, you will be getting it directly from our list. It will be on Facebook page, but it's also stored on our YouTube. And if you like what you saw, if you could give us a thumbs up. And then most importantly, we all get by and learn all this stuff by sharing our resources. So if there's someone that you know that maybe has been asking you these questions or you've been groaning about it over coffee together, it's a great opportunity to share that information. I know literally when I hit and upload this to YouTube, my friend that I was telling you about that we were grabbing greens juices with in LA, she's getting this one because it's about time we all get our businesses legally legit so we can do better together. So Sam, thank you so much. And I found out too, I'm going to get to see you here in Columbus, Ohio in September. So we'll be sharing more information about that experience. I'm really looking forward to it.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you everyone for watching. And please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Thanks.